Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have you on our October webinar, Walking the Trade Show Floor, How to Get the Most Value When You're Not Exhibiting. So the whole idea of this workshop, this webinar is to help you when you're particularly walking through a trade show, not necessarily sort of a general networking event, but when you're at a trade show where there's a trade show floor, exhibit booths, all that. And we see folks who could leverage this much more, not just as an individual tactic at a specific event, but really as an ongoing strategy for their trade shows. So we, for those that don't know much about Meet, our focus as a company is to help other companies exhibit at trade shows, and we particularly focus on business-to-business companies that are scaling quickly, generally thought of as growth companies, and we help them gain traction and scale very quickly. So today I'm joined, actually, a real pleasure actually to be joined not only by my business partner, but my wife, which is actually the same person. So welcome, Kelly and Kelly Kenney. But say hi to everybody, please.
Well, hello, everybody. Kelly Kenney here, checking in from Maryland.
So I'm actually in Istanbul, Turkey this week, and actually participating in a few events, doing some talks. And Kelly is doing similar things in Washington, D.C. So we're joining you from different time zones, and many of you are joining us today from different time zones. We have people from all over the world in this webinar today. So we appreciate that. Many of you have submitted questions. We're going to certainly get to those as we go through this, and certainly invite you to ask additional questions. And we're glad to talk offline as well to answer any additional questions that might be specific to your situation. So, Kelly, let's talk a little bit about what you do at Meet, just so folks have some context in terms of your background and whatnot, and sort of how you got to these skills. What are your responsibilities at Meet?
Well, as you know, I am kind of the behind the scenes person for a lot of my role. I'm part of building the strategy and looking at market research, identifying what kind of events are out there in the marketplace. So I work with the clients on identifying specific shows for them and who the personas are. And then when the show opportunities come around, sometimes I get the opportunity to go and be a part of the floor and meet and greet and do competitive intelligence. And so I'm just out and about on some days or behind scenes building strategy.
So you all know Kelly's being very modest. I've worked with a lot of people who regularly do trade shows, who are active in the trade show scene. I have yet to see anybody that comes anywhere close to Kelly's skills, both at understanding and developing trade show strategy, but also with regard to leveraging the floor, leveraging the booth, all of those activities that identify prospects and allow them to begin the process of converting to customers. So yeah, understandably, you're modest, but you're amazing at it, and you are the trade show ninja. So it's all good. But so what is when you think ninja, and you mentioned doing competitive intelligence, that's probably a good beginning of a description. But what is the idea of being a trade show or walk the floor ninja mean?
Well, I think it starts with an innate love of trade shows, and I do love trade shows. I love being out in the sea of people. I love understanding who's standing in front of me and figuring out what it is they're trying to promote. So I think from my perspective, being a ninja is really being excited about being there and curious. You have to have that underlying ability to kind of go, hey, why are you here? And what is it you're trying to promote? And how can we connect? I mean, that puzzle piece factor of understanding how you might work together, or how they may be a prospect, or how they may be a competitor and doing something different. I think that's the ninja aspect of it, really trying to understand who's there, why, and how can you work together with them or compete with them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so, and for those that are with us, that some of you may want to hire your own ninja, and I can tell you, having worked with a ninja, the maybe one interview question that would indicate that you have the right person, and just ask them, if they ever fly an airline like Southwest where they can choose their own seat. And then ask them which seat they choose. And a ninja, 100% of the time, will answer the middle seat, and they'll bypass the empty row to sit between two people. And Kelly does this regularly, and I get to hear about all the cool conversations she has because she just loves sitting next to people she doesn't know. So they need to be people that are very natural in that situation. But I would a smart interview question, if you want your own ninja, just ask them what seat do they for, and that'll tell you all you need to know. So let's kind of begin getting into some of the meat here. So we think about going to trade shows, and before we even get to the floor, and the day of the event, and so much of I know your work has to do with preparation. So before you get to the event, what are some of the things that you consider or you do so that when you walk the floor, you're most effective?
Well, I think first and foremost is making sure you're going to the right show. So make sure you know why that show and who's going to be there and what is it about the person you're looking to meet. So if you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard to find it. So in my world, it's let's make sure we're at the right show. So that means knowing who we want to meet, knowing what the show is all about, whether it's the exhibit floor and or the content, doing your homework. I mean, really look at the content, really look at the exhibitors one by one and identify like who's a prospect, who's a potential partner, who's a competitor, what are those things that you're really looking for. And to be honest, if you don't have those lined up and prioritized, you can't effectively walk a show. So I kind of make sure I'm at the right show and I've got those elements identified so that when I get there, I've mapped out where I want to go. I have my top 10 or 20 prospects and I'm really chunking through a list and have it mapped out on the exhibit floor so that I can be efficient and effective when I get there.
Got it. Cool. And so thinking about that, and I like the way you separated it into the prospects or potential customers, the potential partners, and then competitors. And I would imagine with each, you have a bit of a different tactic when you go into the booth. So when you're going into a potential customer's booth, what's your objective, or how do you approach that?
Well, a little bit, it's about he who speaks first loses. So I try to engage and get them talking a little bit about why they're at the show, what they're trying to accomplish. And because I come from an event background, like what makes it a great show for you? What makes this, you pick this show? What is it about it that you're trying to make it, and what, if executed and done well, makes this a really successful show for you? So for me, it's always getting them to talk about what they're doing, why they're doing it. And then hopefully at some point they kind of say, so why do you ask? And then we turn around and kind of engage a little bit more. I mean, if you come off hitting, question, then they get suspicious and they kind of back off a little bit. So you kind of have to balance your conversation with, so why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish? Hey, and then reveal. You kind of have to share something, and I probably overshare. I probably say things that a lot of people wouldn't, but I find that sharing a little bit gives them the sense that you're really there for a conversation, not just drilling, as well as they get a sense for who they're talking to, so they know how to position stuff. I do try to stay away from chatty stuff like, gosh, are your feet sore? Or, hey, did you see that booth up here? And those types of things, which I see people kind of do in error. They don't state a topic, and it becomes a wasted time. But I am really focused on getting them to talk, revealing a little bit, and sharing.
Got it. And is there, obviously different booths at customers or potential customers booths all come in all different sizes, and there are different numbers of people in them. But how do you know who to specifically target within a booth, or do you?
It's a roll the dice a lot of times, but there are a few things that you can look at as key indicators. If it's a bigger booth, typically deeper in the booth is better. So the further in you can wade in, and those perimeter people are the early folks that are looking to learn how to work a trade show and to do things. But when you can get deeper into a booth, those are your senior level people, and those are the people that you really want to find your way to get some quality time with. And sometimes you can leverage the people on the outside of the booth to get you an invite and an introduction inside the booth.
That's cool. Yep. So leverage those, network with those folks to get in if you don't identify the right person right out of the gate.
Yep.
And then with partners, how is the approach different there?
Well, with them, I'm looking at, actually it's a little more interviewee-ish. So the conversation is a little bit more about what makes you different. How have you done that? Who do you currently work with? What are your key clients? What did you solve? What kind of problems do you solve? So for partnering, I'm really looking to, and I try to, when I think pre-show, I try to have like 4 or 5 criteria. If I'm thinking partner, I got 4 things that I'm looking for at that partner, and I need to get those 4 elements so that when I go to the next one, I can compare them equally. Because if I just randomly talk to them and go, wow, they're really cool, or that's really good idea, but I haven't really put it into a category that I compare one to the other, I've got 20 different items that don't really give me one-to-one. So in my world, having elements pre-show so that when I get there to look at potential partners, I can compare one to the other.
So I guess if I were going to put that in my own words, sure. You're ultimately saying, okay, what are complementary services for our business right now, or who are potential channel folks who could help us reach new customers? And it sounds like that's the first work you do to identify who's a partner, and then those people are targeted, and then you enter their booths.
Yes, as well as you have to have open radar when you're walking the floor, because you may have looked up some things before the show. You may have preconceived ideas about an organization, but then when you step in the booth and start talking, you go, ding, here's an opportunity. And so you kind of, I hate to walk by a booth totally. If they're huge shows, you have to, but sometimes just by random luck, something picks up in your eye and you really kind of jump on it. But it's something to have openness when you're walking the floor as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the third segment you talked about were competitors and learning from them and doing competitive intelligence, which is a much more sensitive thing to do, particularly if you're inside the company, but more often than not, you're doing this for clients. And first, let's talk about maybe some of the things you think about, and then, I think we'll talk a little bit about, are there different tactics if you are inside the company. But let's talk about first, when you're representing a company, obviously you have the benefit of being a little bit at arm's length, so you have other business cards you can share that don't give away your identity. But talk about that. How do you identify which competitors to meet, and then what's the process?
Well, it varies a little bit by show, because in some industries, competitors are true, like head to head, and they're very close to the vest, and they really are, and when things are really tight, I usually look at people instead of what they're selling, what their pricing is, how are they differentiating themselves. I look at when things are really competitive, I'm looking at who's in the booth, what are their roles, who are they talking to, and so I'm looking to get the essence of what their strategy is a little bit further away than if it's a little less competitive and it's more of a friendly relationship. Then I'm leaning in a little bit and kind of talking a little bit more like, hey, can we help you? Maybe you can help us. How's your world? Hey, how's that particular client relationship going? That was a great win for you guys. Congratulations. So I'm leaning in a little bit more on the less head-to-head, like tough industry competitors, and doing a little more of the friendly, howdy ho, how's your world? We're all in this together. We're all trying to help the marketplace solve a certain problem. You guys do it this way, we do it this way. How's that working for you? So it's a nuancy thing, but if you can get that rhythm going with a person and listen really hard, you pick up really good stuff.
Okay. Let's imagine there are more head-to-head, and you have to be a bit more discreet. Can you talk through more of the specifics on that?
So in that scenario, I'm really playing the observant role, looking at what they actually have in their booth. What are they offering up? What are what's their booth offer? What are they positioning themselves as? And how does that directly compete with me or not? And sometimes there's an offshoot component. I'll say, hey, well, that's really interesting. I hadn't seen that you guys have done this before. Can you tell me a little bit about that? So I'm looking to see how we differentiate and bridge the conversation gap with the differentiators, and then maybe get into, so how's the show been for you? Who are you meeting? And ease into some of the more delicate competitive intel stuff that we're looking to accomplish.
Got it. Cool. And is there with competitors anyone in particular you aim at in terms of key contacts?
Well, anybody in the upper management team, of course, their sales team. Sometimes if they're a really large booth, I kind of go for the marketing angle. So I'm looking for key marketing people and understand, like, why did they come here? What are they trying to accomplish? What's their messaging at the show? So anything I can pick up around that, and then talking them directly is really intriguing and fun. And the more competitive it is, the less I disclose about me. And you got to be really amazed, and I'm always amazed at how little they ask you. They never ask you, like, so why are you asking? I can ask them a lot of, like, hey, did you meet anybody great? Or did you see this content piece? So I've evaluated the show before I've gotten there. I've looked at the show content, and I know, like, what's really interesting to us. So I'm assuming it's really interesting to them. So I'll say, hey, did anybody in your group catch this presentation? And I'll bring up something about that presentation that should make their antennas go pop. But they never ask me why I'm asking. And it's really interesting what you can learn about what they know about the show, what they're following in the show, who they've met. And really, if you say, so what makes this a great show for you? They tell you a lot. And I really love it. It's kind of like I walk out of booths sometimes and I go, oh my gosh, I have a satchel full of information. Ha ha ha.
And what I'm hearing is you ask open-ended questions. You give them an opportunity to talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you'd be surprised. The more you come straight at them versus try to bounce around things, the more they'll give up. They really, unless they're really, really astute exhibitor, they don't know what they're giving or why. And to me, by the way, I am of the mind, and because I do a lot of these, I take copious notes 5 minutes after I leave that booth. I find a quiet place, I sit down and I write down everything, even though it's maybe way off base. I write down everything I learned in that booth and just tuck it away because I don't know when I'll need that data point. And I use it post-show as a follow-up with them or as a reminder to myself about what was great at that booth.
Got it. That's cool. And we've talked about booths, but maybe actually one more question while we're on booths. So are there, well, maybe two more questions, let's say. So one question would be, I think there are folks that would certainly have a question about how do you start the conversation? So you walk up and, you did talk a little bit about how you open it, but are there some specific, is there a kind of a go-to opening question that you ask or an opening statement that seems to work the best?
I guess I focus on them always. And I focus, if I'm unsure about where to start or how to do things, I pick something out that they're really promoting in their booth. So what their booth is saying to me says, that's your message. That's what you're trying to get out into the show. So I ask them something about their message. For me, that's my go-to. If I'm really not sure what I'm walking into and I'll go, hey, you're talking about telecom and radar or some sort of technology. That's really interesting to me. What is your message with that? And so I just gently step into it based on whatever's biggest. And, I think of it as a billboard. Every booth should have a billboard, and whatever their billboard is, I should ask a question about that first.
Sure. And I suppose the next question, which is, there are sometimes when the conversation is at an end, but the person who you're talking to doesn't realize it, and they just keep going, and you have other stuff to do, and you want to move on. Is there something a go-to that you use to disengage from the conversation?
That is the hardest part for me ever. I am the hardest. I will listen to you forever if you want to talk to me, but it is at some point, and usually it's the technology guy who gets into something they're very comfortable in talking about. And I usually use humor to disengage. I usually go like, wow, that's way above my pay grade. I have no clue what you're talking about. But is there somebody I can send your way that would be really interested in this? So I try to get them to tell me to leave. But it is not my strength. I really could say you are better at breaking a conversation than I am. But I tended to do it as a, wow, gosh, I just don't really get that. And it's probably not something we're into at this point. But who can I find that would be interesting for you to talk to?
Sure.
So,
okay, cool. So let's go back to the plan for a minute. So we talked about sort of going to a booth, but you did mention earlier about, the if there are tracks of workshops that are happening. I guess the first question is, are there other show features, including the workshops, if there are any, that you would also make sure to have on your list as places to connect with key influencers or resources?
Absolutely. Great question. Thanks. So I review all the tracks. I looked at the specifics as much for content as for who's going to be in the audience. And in my game, it's who's in the audience is far more interesting to me than the content, but the content drives who's in the audience. So I evaluate the show and I pick through and look at where are my prospects attending? What things would they be interested in? What are my competitors looking at? Who are my partners that are presenting? And so I look at those things, and if it's a really good topic, I make sure to have 2 or 3 questions in my pocket, not necessarily because I'm dying to know the answer, but because I'm dying to stand up and ask a great question. Because A, that gets me seen, B, that gets the content that I'm looking for, and C, it strikes up a conversation later on. I'm always watching who's attending those sessions, and I'll see you at a later piece, or I'll bump into you on the floor and I'll go, hey, Bill, I saw that you were looking at this tract. What did you think of that session? What did you learn? How was that for you? And it's just a way for me to have a different conversation with you randomly on the floor. And I'm a colors person. I'll look at the clothing in the audience and I'll pick you out because you asked a good question and you were wearing this green tie. And I'll see you later in that green tie and I'll walk up to you and say, hey, I noticed you were at the session. And they usually take a little bit back. They're taken aback that I know that they were there. But then that I recalled their question and we start the conversation there, that moves us much quickly into a deeper conversation than, hey, what's great about this conference for you? You know,
it's either that or they run away yelling, stalker, stalker, one or the other.
Yeah, that they probably think that, but I don't have too many run away from me. I can get away with walking up to just about anybody. I'm not very intimidating, really, at all.
Well, yeah. With the one thing you didn't mention that I would imagine is valuable. You talked about thinking about who's in the audience, but do you also look at who's speaking and potentially look to connect with them if it makes sense?
I sure do. And actually, if they're really interesting to me, I send them a LinkedIn message before I go to the show. Mm-hmm. And I say, hey, I'm really interested in your topic. I'm going to be at the event. Would love to connect with you. I'll stop by the show. Reach out if I know you're going to be busy. Sometimes I even offer, let's connect for coffee or something. So if there's somebody I really want to meet, I find them, or I find that, when they're post presentation or some of the networking opportunities. And that gives me the intro. Hey, I connected with you on LinkedIn. I really loved your talk. I would love to talk with you more.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. So you've had the booth, you have the workshops. Are there any other show features that you also sort of put on your list to make connections at?
Anything and everything. Hallways, restrooms. I find the best, and this is, sorry for all the gals out there, in the restroom is the best place to really have a good conversation because it's the gals. The guards are down, and because most events are male dominated, it's a place for you to relax and kind of have a easy conversation. So in and out of the restrooms, at receptions, I love going to networking receptions. And then anywhere that you happen to see somebody wearing a badge. And the further away from the show that you see the badge, the more fun it is. So if they've inadvertently left the conference floor and they've left the hotel and they are walking down to get a Starbucks coffee and you see them with a show badge on, I make sure to talk to that person. I just think it's.
And that wouldn't necessarily be specific because you don't have, they're not in their booth, they're not in a specific workshop. So that's a more random type of connection. Are those valuable?
Absolutely. Random connections. You don't ever hope to meet the CEO of whatever by that, but you do tend to randomly connect with somebody who, by the way, you don't know who they know. You don't know what their background is or the industry history they have. I've gleaned more from those types of conversations that help me in future conversations about the industry, about intelligence, about their life past, hey, we have a common interest, and they'll go, oh, well, Bob has the same interest, and he'll introduce me to Bob. So it's kind of one of those things. It's the randomness of being alert and engaged at a show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I kind of call it the lottery system of networking, but it works.
Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, the fact that you're meeting so many people that are, you've targeted and it's very specific, having a little bit of randomness in there, also, and you've proven that it adds to the value. So some decent percentage of the people you randomly meet are also very productive. So yeah, it's all good. And you never know who you're going to meet. So better to flip the stone over than leave it lying down.
I would call it ridiculously lucky sometimes. But, and just one other thought that just came to mind that was more about the show floor that I just wanted to bring up while I was thinking of it. Sorry, old age. But when you're walking up to a booth, point out something to the booth person that you really love about their booth. It's kind of amazing, but people love to be complimented about their booth. And so if you see something that's really interesting, or if you saw something in the show out there, like some of the large shows, like up the escalator, you'll see somebody's logo on the escalator track or whatever. If you walk onto the show floor and say, hey, I love that you guys were on the escalator, they love that feedback. And so giving them feedback about their booth, or where they're marketing, or where you saw them on our marquee, or like I'm here in Maryland and I drove by a field that was named by one of a large organization that's at this event. I said, hey, I saw your sign when I was driving down I-95. And they love that because they spend a lot of money on that and they hope somebody sees it. So
cool. So I think you mentioned taking copious notes. So, most of us collect business cards when we go to these events. And do you do anything with those business cards while you're on the floor or while you're talking to somebody? Have you come up with some kind of a notation or system to help, whether it's remember certain things or to prioritize the follow-up with certain people or to categorize them?
Yes, we have a coding system, and that coding system is whether they are a prospect, a competitor, or a partner. And then we use and we keep it really simple, 1, 2, 3. So 1 is like immediate, like before I leave that show, I'm reaching out to that person and connecting back with them to say, hey, great to meet you at the show. Let's follow up on that quick conversation we had. What's your schedule look like? 2s and 3s, I typically wait till maybe the end of the show. And from there, the 3s are they were nice to meet. I put them in my database and they become somebody that we are in touch with over time, but not necessarily directly picking up a phone and saying, great. The 1s absolutely during the show, the 2s post-show, and then the 3s are people that are just like random people. And if we meet them again and they're interested in something that we do, or I'm interested in them, we connect. So I also, though, jot a little note about what we talked about or something that will trigger that conversation for me. So we have our coding system, but something about that conversation was intriguing enough that I write it down right then.
And so you do it right in the booth when you're talking to them, or when you walk outside the booth normally?
It depends on how engaging we are. Sometimes, and they typically don't hand me their card until as we're leaving. So I usually take a step out and write something down. Yeah, just right after we talk.
Yeah. But definitely while it's immediate, while it's fresh in your mind, not waiting till later.
No, right then. It's amazing how much lapse it escapes, the little nuggets. And at the time you go, well, of course I'll remember that. But when you've talked to as many people as I talked to all day long at an event, when I get home, I've got a stack of cards. And if I haven't, and I will say 98% of them have a little note on it of some sort.
Right. Cool. If you don't get a note, then it's not good, right? You're a 4 or lower.
Yep.
That's not good. So then so the follow-up you said is prioritized, and so some happens before before you leave the show or before the trade show ends or that later that day, and then some doesn't happen till after the event. What's the follow-up normally like? What's your sort of, and this obviously is a general thing, but what's your normal next action that, or your call to action for somebody you're following up with?
Well, if they're really, really, really like, gotta meet, gotta move, I will send them, like that night, go back to my hotel, send them a note like, wow, that was a great conversation. Hey, while we're here, we happen to be in the same thing. You know, do you want to catch coffee? Do you want to get together? Blah, blah, blah. The next phase is those that right after the show, great to meet you. It was fabulous. I usually do an email to them and then a LinkedIn connection. I love LinkedIn. It is my tool for networking and making sure I'm connected with you, and taking a little, I actually look at your LinkedIn profile and I find something about you that's interesting and connects our conversation and connects us. And I put that in a specific note to you and use that tool as an engagement. And then from there, whether we're working with a client and I'll pass a lead to them, or I'll set an appointment with them for that particular contact, that usually happens within 2 to 3 days of an event.
That makes sense. And so let's transition now to our audience questions. And there are a few here that we haven't addressed, and there are some that we'll probably address a little bit lighter because we've at least hit them partially. So the first question is, how do you connect to the right person in the booth? And you've talked a little bit around this, but are there some things that you'd add to this specific question?
Well, I'll start with, first and foremost, know who the right person is for you to meet. It is really amazing when you walk into a big booth. You know, I've been in booths where there's been 150, 160 people in a booth. So you got to know who you're looking to connect with in that booth very specifically, either by name or by title. Then by title, as you're talking to the perimeter people, you want to say, hey, I'm trying to meet such and such of a person within your organization. Would they happen to be here today? And could you walk me over and introduce me? So that brings you deeper into the booth, and it gets you closer to at least the realm of who you're trying to talk to. And, you know, from there you engage and start the conversation around, hey, it was really great talking to your colleague, and I'd love to learn more about what you do for this organization, and roll it from there.
Cool. Next question is, what types of marketing materials should you bring with you, if any? Do you ever bring marketing materials with you?
I'm not a huge carry market material with me. I certainly do tend to have one pager with me. If somebody's just chomping at the bit and needs to know, tell me a little bit more about what you do, I would rather follow up with them and say, hey, let's talk about this offline or schedule a time to chat. But I do carry a one pager with me. I don't tend to have a lot of those with me, and I'm very hesitant because I'm not necessarily there. That one pager is just a reminder, and my card should be able to do that as well. So, and because I am the person who owns follow-up, I don't care if you say you're going to call me. I don't care if you say, hey, let's meet. I own follow-up. I never let that be the other person's responsibility because I don't trust anybody to do it. So handing them a piece of marketing material is great. It gives them a little, it maybe gives me a little more credibility, and the visuals should help them understand a little bit about me. But I'm not a huge marketing, carry your whole suitcase full of stuff person.
Is part of that because you're sensitive not to take up too much of their time? Because I would imagine that you know, you have to be observant when you're walking the floor that these people have paid money for a booth, or they've come to give a talk, and their first priority, generally when you pay for a booth, is it's prospect acquisition, is part of the reason not to take materials, so that you're not impinging too much on your time. Your real goal is to see if there's a reason to talk again, as opposed to actually getting them to whether it's buy on the floor or commit to something beyond actually an initial conversation.
Well, that's so far off my radar, buying on the floor, that I don't even consider it, even to talk about it in this format. Shame on me. But it truly is. If there's a reason to talk, they don't need the piece of paper per se. And they did buy the booth, and they are there looking for, their prospects. And I do offer to help. And by the way, I have gone to many a show where at the end of the show, the exhibitor goes, "Wow, you sent me 4 people. That was great." And it's just more because I so value what networking is. The essence of networking is just connecting people, that it's really important to me that if I see somebody going, "Hey, I'm really trying to connect with," and I know there's a person in the booth that does that, I'm going to connect them. Now it's up to them to discern if it's the right connection and all those other, deeper relationship things. But I'm going to say, "Hey, did you talk to so-and-so? Hey, and I'll walk across the floor. I'll go all the way to the other end and introduce 2 people, because that's great karma or something. But it also, that person in the booth will remember that we had a brief conversation and I introduced them to somebody that was of value to them. And down the road, when we have an opportunity to connect again, or I have a need to know about something within their organization, they're going to be a lot more likely to share with me." So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So while we're on this topic, there's a kind of a similar question. So somebody asks, I'll give their question and then see if I can explain it. So they ask, walking the trade show floor versus suitcasing. And I believe what they mean is, sort of walking the trade show floor and you might have your business cards, versus walking the trade show floor and having a briefcase or something full of collateral that you would give out. And I immediately think of quite often exhibitors experience people who are looking for work, who are handing out their resumes. And I would say, as an exhibitor, I less experience people handing out their marketing materials much as I experience people handing out their resumes. But how do you feel about that? And I think you mostly answered it, but the idea of actually coming with sort of loaded down with marketing material, ready to serve it out.
Nope, not my strategy at all. It's, as you mentioned, they bought that booth. They've bought the real estate and invested the time and the energy and do that. They are not looking for me to sell them. I really resist that inclination. And by the way, I don't try to take all their tchotchkes or do all that stuff either. So I don't want any of their stuff. I want a real connection. I want a real relationship with these people. And those that have, that we have synergy with, I'm going to follow up with them and I hope they respond to me. And they're going to respond to me if we've had a great conversation and I've asked them some good questions and we found that linkage. And therefore, we don't need paper and 20 brochures and all the other stuff. My website should be good. My content should be good. And our conversation should be excellent. So that's where I head.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the next question, I'm actually going to, because we've talked a little bit about this, I'm sort of going to summarize, I think, your position on this, and then let's talk about that. So I guess when you look at connecting with exhibitors or connecting with people who are on the floor or giving talks, it sounds like the lion's share, if not all of the conversation that you endeavor to have, is about them. You're really digging into a variety of questions that help you learn and build relationship with those individuals, as opposed to you sharing information, or other than you're not unresponsive when they ask you questions, but your real goal isn't to share, it's actually to learn. Is that is that a fair characterization of your goal when you engage people on the floor?
Absolutely. When I'm walking the floor, I'm learning and puzzle pieces, putting things together and trying to connect for them, other things into them. But I really think most people in a booth are looking to give out information, and they have stuff they want to share. So by you asking questions and making it easy for them and guiding them to the types of things you're looking for, because they probably have 500 things they could tell you, but you only want 6. So by asking good questions, you're going to really solicit the information that's going to be valuable to yourself and to them, because you're going to form a linkage around why you should. And by the way, you shouldn't be at a show unless you can add value. I mean, there's something about being present and connecting and having some industry knowledge and doing some things. When you're at a show, you bring that, and you should stand up tall and look people in the eye and smile and feel confident that you have something to offer, as well as extracting information. So it's got to be a little bit of a give and take, and it's also got to be good pointed questions.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Cool. So this sounds a bit like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're really approaching this like a child might approach playing the game memory. If you assume the trade show floor, you sort of know, you know who you're targeting, but you really don't know much about them, and your real goal is to sort of create one bit of knowledge, or flip over one card and identify something, flip over another card, and if there's a match, you actually make the match. But as the event goes on, or as the relationship with that community goes on, your knowledge expands so much that you're actually able to make significant amount of matches. Besides helping yourself make valuable connections, you're actually helping your connections make connections, which creates goodwill and value and so on. But is that a reasonable metaphor for what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. It's perfect. I really, I wish more people thought that way at trade shows, because sometimes they're so singularly focused that they're only looking for what they're looking for, that they forget that there's opportunities for exchange in a lot of different ways. But I can see when I'm walking a floor, I can tell people who know how to walk a floor. I can see them a mile away. I can tell that experienced, tenured salesperson who's working the floor but has good relationships, and you can watch body language. You can see those people, they stand out a mile away. And by the way, when you go into content, look for those people, sit next to them, because they're the ones who get how to network and connect. And those are the ones that you're going to want a relationship with, because you'll multiplier effect do better.
Cool. So some of these questions are redundant. I think we've covered them. I'm going to skip a few here. So here's an interesting question, and we haven't necessarily talked about this directly. So how do you walk the trade show floor without feeling pushy or salesy, and to actually make some connections with people there? So I think we've addressed parts of this, but not necessarily directly. So how do you walk the show floor and engage people without feeling pushy or salesy?
Well, this is an interesting thing. And in addition to, having good questions and probing and all that, take a step back and realize that we're all human. And I don't care what company or organization but we're all away from home, and or we're spending a day on our feet, so empathy is a great card to carry with you. If you're, concerned about feeling salesy, being empathic about their situation and what they're trying to accomplish and where they are on standing on the floor for 20 hours and all that kind of stuff. I find that being a human being, like, gosh, you must be exhausted, or, oh, it's 3 o'clock. Did you have a lunch break yet? Or having that empathic thing helps me to not feel pushy or salesy. I'm trying to relate to them on a human level, as well as asking good questions and drawing things out from them. But that takes away the salesy edge of the conversation. And I guess it's being empathic in your listening and in your questioning that helps you connect and understand where they are coming from on a long day, far from home, stayed out too late last night. And by the way, you can pick out those people who won the party last night. You can see them in the booth the next day and walk up to them and go, hey, how you doing today? And you don't call them out on it, but you can see it. And most people, if they're real, will go like, whew, that was a great night. That opening reception was wonderful. You know, so I think being relatable and empathic to their situation really takes the edge off of the salesy, like, hey, I want to ask you 20 questions.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, so this will be the last audience question. Then I have one more question for you. So the last question here for the moment is, what do you do when you have multiple people from the same company walking the floor?
Perfect question, because as much as you need to have an event plan, you need to task your team. You need to have them have a specific goal. And sometimes I do it in the form of, hey, let's everybody get 5 partner contacts. You know, you have this quadrant, I have this quadrant, you take that one, like, or you take this type of, you take prospects, you take partners, you take competitors. And so it depends on who the team is, depends on how willing they are to engage. Sometimes they aren't. Not everybody likes to play the game, but I really try to have a 2 weeks before the event, a good conversation about why we're going, what's going to be there, and what your assignments are, and then a morning huddle. I like to do it in the morning, sometime during the day, maybe we meet for lunch or do something, and then after, to make sure everybody's on the same play, make sure if there was some intel that somebody got that somebody else can follow up on, because you want to hit each booth in different ways from different people. You get more out of the show, and what I ask and what you might ask are different. And so even if we hit the same booths, that's fine, but we need to condense our information and collaborate and make sure that if somebody got an aha, that we follow up on that while we're all at the show.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. So actually, I did find one other audience question that I think would be kind of interesting as well, is that how do you, and this is not necessarily directly related to walking the floor, I think it has to do with any kind of participation at a trade show. How do you keep your energy up for 3+ day events?
Well, I'd love to say like coffee and something else, but I don't do coffee. So these are like very tactical things, but number one, have great shoes, perfect shoes. Casual is fine. Nobody looks down. They look at your face. Number two, don't try to win the parties. So, you know, if this is a 2 or 3 day event, you're there to work. The work is done on the floor and the early part of the networking session at night. You don't have to be the last man standing, so get your sleep. And then the other piece I would say is like, take breaks during the day, go outside, get some fresh air, go get a cup of coffee off site, do something to break it up so that you're catching your breath. And by the way, don't take that break to go do your email and to do whatever. Email has to wait. You know, there isn't anything on our day that's that important that's gonna, like, the world's gonna end if you didn't respond to that email in 3 minutes. So be there, be focused, be on your game when you're on the floor. Take a break if you need it. Have comfortable shoes and always have Band-Aids in your bag. because sorry, ladies, you're going to get a blister. That's the way it is.
Excellent. So, so let's have a sort of a final thought, or sort of if you were going to sort of summarize all this, what would be the sort of the biggest thought about engaging and being successful in walking a trade show floor?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to, you got to make sure you're at the right show. You got to make sure you have a plan for when you're at the show. I mean, I can't tell you how many people just show up at a show and go, well, we're here. And they haven't looked at the event. They haven't looked at who's exhibiting. They haven't looked at the tracks and what the content is. I mean, come on, folks. This is like a roadmap for your next 3 days. And it can lead to excellent places, or it can lead you into a wall and you go, wow, that was a waste of time. So have a plan, know what you're looking for, get excited, have fun, meet people. I mean, it is amazing who you can meet at a trade show. Know that everybody you meet has a backstory, which is really amazing, the stories you can hear, and have fun. Be rested. I don't know. And follow up. Oh, daggone it, follow up. That's how I would do it.
So I'm going to share something for the folks that wouldn't necessarily choose the middle seat on an airplane. So, I think Kelly's coming at this from the perspective of a super extrovert. For those that maybe aren't that far to the edge on the extrovert scale, or maybe even introverts, I would also suggest to the bullet list is be comfortable or get comfortable being out of your comfort zone. Look and even model people who you see being comfortable in these situations. Pretend you're them. Anything you can do to stretch yourself in that way. And the one thing Kelly and I talk about quite a bit is we never come home upset from attending an event. It's sometimes hard to leave the office to go to an event because you have stuff going on, or hard to commit to going away for 3 days or whatever the case might be. But we've never come home thinking it was a waste of time. We always get some value, meet some key people, get some key pieces of information. So, and that if it's not your natural tendency to want to do events, you have to pretend. You got to stretch it a bit and be an extrovert. So before I let you go, Kelly, I'm just going to share we have got a great November webinar coming up. It's November 19th. It's right now the title's being worked on, but it's essentially making a kick-ass exhibit. So we're actually going to have an exhibit expert with us, Joe Botone from CDS Displays. We're going to talk all about sort of the hardware a little bit, but more so how do we make the exhibit really represent us well and be the right kind of bait to catch the fish we're aiming for. So please join us for that. Again, November 19th. We really appreciate everybody being with us. Kelly, we appreciate you being with us and all the great information you shared. We will follow up. You'll get a link to this webinar, and also we certainly invite you to ask additional questions. We'd be happy to chat with anyone one-on-one. But Kelly, thank you so much for joining us, and keep doing the great work.
Thanks. It was great. Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
All righty. And excuse both of our backgrounds. I'm in a hotel in Istanbul, Turkey. Kelly is at her sister's house in Washington, D.C. You're hearing a barking dog. So with that, it's all great. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Bye now.
Hello.